Rabinovitch, the third Yortzeit was just last week on Yud Bet Iyar, and the Rabbi Rabinovitch used to be a rabbi in Toronto, Canada, and also in various other places. He was the head of Jewish College in England, and he was the Rosh Yeshiva of a Yeshivat Ma'ale Edumim, which is in Mitzpeh Nevo. I had the greatest chut to know him and ask him questions. I even came to his house a few times, and he was a very big Talmid Chacham. I am just going to say one story about him, which perhaps some of you have heard before. But Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was his Talmid, and one time they traveled together. In London, and Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was the driver, and then had a very busy junction. The car stopped working, so Rabbi Jonathan Sachs tried to start the engine, but it didn't work. So Rabinovitch said, if we are stuck here, nothing happens by chance. So let's study Torah. So we started giving a beautiful shiur on the laws of Shemitah and Yovel in the Rambam, and all the cars were honking behind them because they were blocking the traffic. But he continued giving the shiur, and then after he finished the introduction, so he turned to Rabbi Sachs and he told him, now try starting the engine. And of course, Rabbi Sachs tried, and the engine was working again. So this is just a small anecdote about him. But I do want to talk about...
He had a PhD in mathematics, right?
That's correct. He
From John Hopkins, I think. Or maybe
wrote a very interesting book about the statistics in the halakha. A very interesting book, which was translated also in Hebrew. So, but his life's work was actually the Yad Pshuta on the Maimonides. He wrote 22 volumes of these, but he only covered 2/3 of Mishneh Torah la Rambam. And according to my estimate, another 15 volumes that have to be written. So the question is, what is going to be the fate of a Yad Pshuta project? We are soon going to talk about what the Yad Pshuta is. But the good news is that Rabbi Rabinovitch, with his wisdom, he developed leadership skills in his students, and he trained them how to continue his work. And I spoke to some of the students who are working on those 15 volumes, and B'ezrat Hashem, they are going to be published as well. Now, Rabbi Rabinovich's ability to develop leadership skills within his student wasn't limited to the Yad Pshuta project, but it was actually his educational approach was to empower the students and to make them into leaders. As Rabbi Jonathan Sachs once said, that a great leader creates leaders. And there is another anecdote that I would like to share with you, which Rabbi Jonathan Sachs told, and he told that that he said like this. I'm going to tell you the story that he said after Rabinovitch passed away, that Rabbi Sachs started learning in a Jewish college from Rabinovitch at a very late age, at the age of 25, and he did not have much background in a halacha or in a Jewish philosophy or the Jewish sources. It is a story by itself, how he decided to leave Cambridge and to become a rabbi. It is connected to a life-changing meeting that he had with Lubavitcher Rebbe, but we are not going to discuss it now because our topic is Rabbi Rabinovitch. So he applied to a Jews college, and at the time, Rabbi Rabinovitch was the head of a Jews college, and he said to them, and this is what Rabbi Sachs tells in his book, I Believe. So he says like this. He says like this. He explained to me that the fastest and best way of learning anything is to teach it. So with the day I entered a Jewish college as a student, I also entered it as a lecturer. So Rabbi Sachs says that how many people would had that idea and taken of that risk. So that is what the Rabbi Sachs says about Rabbi Rabinovitch. So this is just a few anecdotes about him, and now we are going to study a bit about his method, and in order to demonstrate how he found the key to understanding the Maimonides, we are going to examine a very interesting sugya concerning a Bar Kochva, that is connected also to Lag BaOmer. So just a few words about his method. Now, what difficulty do we have in studying the Maimonides?
Well, Maimonides doesn't give any sources. He just writes like, okay, this is the halacha, without explaining how and where he got it from.
Beautiful. The Maimonides actually, it doesn't write any sources, and in later years, the Maimonides regretted it, and he said that if he would have had the time and strength to write a new book, he would do so that explains every source for every single halakha that he has in the Mishneh Torah. So, however, what is special about the Yada Pshuta, about the this he said of Rabbi Rabinovitch, is that he actually is able to discover the sources for the work of the Maimonides, and this is what makes it so extraordinary. Now, we're going to just talk a bit about the method in general terms, and then we are going to see the very interesting example about Bar Kochva. Okay, so we just a few ideas about his method. How do you think it is possible to discover the sources? Because if Maimonides didn't write them, how do you know what are the sources? So, how would you do so?
Like, let's say Maimonides writes something and you're not able to find the source that you're looking for. I think there's three pillars when it comes to halakha. They're Rosh and what's the name of the other one? Forgot. Rambam, Rosh, and
Rif.
Riv.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, and that's where you found it.
Okay, so the Rosh lived after the Maimonides. So there's a yeshuv that Maimonides based some of his work on the Rif, and he also based it on the Gionim. But how is it possible to discover what are the sources from the Talmud, from the Talmud and the halachic midrashim? So the answer is that Maimonides always, not always, but mostly used the same language as a Chazal. So if you see a certain phrase in the Maimonides, you have to look for that phrase in the Talmud. And then you will kind of discover what? Then you kind of discover what is the source of the Maimonides. Okay, so with this you could see over here in source 6 on a page 2, because what it says in the Mishnah in Eduyot, she'adam chayav lomar bilshon rabo. For the student has to use the same language as his rabbi. So the Maimonides wanted to teach that he is a chain in the chain of the generations. You're passing the Torah from a generation into a generation. So he used the same language as Chazal. So this is something very important. Yes.
Rabbi. So Chazal, first Rambam and then Chazal, or Chazal Rambam?
Chazal and then Rambam.
So Rambam got the source.
Chazal is in the Mishnah, the Talmud, and then Maimonides lived about 1,000 years afterwards.
Okay.
And now, if you look at it at a C, so say 13, but it is the order of Maimonides. It is very important to in order to understand what Maimonides is talking about, one has to study his work when you pay attention to the order that he writes each law. Because what these have, the order is very, very important to understand. So, and this is what Maimonides himself says. You could see in a source 13 in his responsa. So he says that to somebody who asked him a question, so he said, I already explained it in the laws of a brachot. You were sort of studied the previous laws, and then you wouldn't have any question. Now D, source 14, Maimonides is his own commentator. The best commentator is Maimonides himself.
Kesef Mishnah?
What?
Kesef Mishnah?
That is a true. Rabbi Yosef Karo, he was a very important commentator, the Kesef Mishnah.
It's by Yosef Karo. Kesef Mishnah.
That's right, on Maimonides. Nevertheless, Maimonides himself, he explains his own words in different places. So if you will look at a different source, the different laws that he writes, and you would compare the two, and you compare it with his responsa, and you would compare it with his introductions and his commentary on the Mishnah. So then you can have a clear picture what he is talking about. And now, now I would like to talk about the uniqueness of Yadei Pshuta. Why is this book so unique? So there's a few reasons. First, if you could look, please, on a page 5, you could see the signature of Maimonides. You could see the signature of Maimonides. Now, what Rabbi Rabinovitch did, he searched and found the best manuscripts, the most accurate manuscripts of Maimonides, and he based his commentary on those manuscripts. So, for example, there are, yes?
No.
The Book of Mada and Ahava, the best manuscript is actually called the Oxford manuscript. And if you want to find it, you could look over here in footnote 4, Huntington 80. And what is special about this manuscript, it is that it is the only manuscript that is signed by Maimonides himself with this signature. So it means that he himself gave his approval to this manuscript. So many times the great questions are removed when you go to the most accurate manuscript, and then but over the generations there have been many mistakes in manuscripts in general, but especially in the manuscripts of the Maimonides. Not that he wrote, but in those days, they didn't, before the invention of a printing press, they used to copy by hand the books. And it used to be very difficult to copy complicated and long books. So there were many mistakes. And there were also the censors, the Christian censors, they took out anything that they didn't approve of. And for example, in the book that I am holding here, almost a whole chapter has been removed, because but it talks about Christianity and Islam. So they removed it. And only if you go to the most ancient and the most exact manuscripts, you can see the full source. So and so it is true that many commentators, they tried to discover the sources of a Maimonides, but in Yada Pshuta, there has been a very thorough and exact work that has been done, and he also, as I mentioned before, but he believes that the Maimonides interprets himself. So he brings different quotes from all of the other books of Maimonides. Okay, so we now finished the introduction. Okay, this is the introduction about the method of Yad Pshuta of a Rabbi Rabinovitch. Now we are going to examine it together. A very interesting question about a Baal Kochva. Okay, so just a few words about the Baal Kochva revolt. Just a moment. So the Baal Kochva revolt took place after the destruction of the Second Temple. Okay, it was against the Roman Empire between the years 132 to 136, and it was a very important revolt. It actually was the revolt after the Great Revolt in the years 66 to 73, that as a result, the first temple, the second temple was destroyed by the Romans. And now the leader of the revolt was Baal Kochva. And there are letters that Baal Kochva wrote, very interesting letters that were rediscovered, that were discovered in the caves in the Judean desert next to the Dead Sea. But to tell us a lot of information about the revolt. Now, there is a very difficult question that the Maimonides that is asked on the Maimonides. Okay, so I am just going to read what the Maimonides says about the Baal Kochva revolt. Now, who supported the Baal Kochva revolt? Does anyone know?
Rabbi Akiva.
That's right, Rabbi Akiva supported it, and the Maimonides.
It was Mashiach, no?
That's right. And he thought that he was the Mashiach. Now, I've got a different shiur about that. How could it be that he thought that he was the Mashiach, and what kind of a Mashiach? Because there are two kinds. But this is a separate shiur. Today we are going to do something new. So the Maimonides writes, and you could see it in the source 18, that Rabbi Akiva was, I'm first going to read it in Hebrew and then I will translate. Rabbi Akiva, Chacham Gadol haya mechachmei Mishnah haya. He was a great sage of the sages of the Mishnah. V'hu haya noseh kelav shel ben Koziva hamelech. He supported Bar Kochva. V'hu haya omer alav shehu hamelech haMashiach, and he used to say about him that he is the Mashiach. V'dimahu v'kol chachmei doro shehu hamelech haMashiach. And Rabbi Akiva thought, and all the sages of his generation thought that he was the Mashiach. Okay? And now Maimonides also writes the same thing in the laws of the Ta'aniyot in a source 19. Now, I am going to read a source from the Jerusalem Talmud, and I would like you to ask a question when you compare both of these sources, okay? So in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says like this: Tane, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Akiva Rabbi, היה דורש, דרך כוכב מיעקב, דרך כוזבה מיעקב. Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai used to say, my rabbi, Rabbi Akiva, used to say on the verse, דרך כוכב מיעקב, דרך כוזבה מיעקב. A star he shines from Jacob, Kuzba Bar Kochva shines from Jacob. Rabbi Akiva, kad hava chame Bar Kuzba, hava amar dinhu malka Mashiach. When Rabbi Akiva used to see Bar Kochva, he used to say, he is the Mashiach. Now, pay attention to this. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta. Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta was a different sage, and he said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva, ya'alu asabim belechayecha ve'adayin ben David lo yavo. Weeds are going to grow on your cheeks, meaning that many years after you were going to be buried, dead and buried, weeds are going to grow on top of your tomb, and still, ve'adayin ben David lo yavo, and the Mashiach still is not going to come. So, what question could you ask when you compare the Jerusalem Talmud and the sources that I read just the year before by Maimonides?
Well, I guess the first one, it's saying that he's the Mashiach. And so the second one, he's saying that like in his lifetime, it was like the Mashiach's not going to come.
Mm-hmm.
So how can those both work at the same time?
Okay, so but it is two different people. There's a Rabbi Akiva, and there is Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta. Rabbi Akiva says that Bar Kochva was the Mashiach, and Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta says that he wasn't.
Well, did they live around the same time?
Yes. They
So the
lived at the same time.
Rambam said that all the
Ah.
all the leaders of the generation
Mhm.
believed that he was Mashiach. Apparently, Torah did not.
That's right. Maimonides says that Rabbi Akiva and all the sages of his generation believed that he was the Mashiach. Okay? Now, this is what is written in the laws of kings. And in the laws of the Ta'aniyot, the fast days, so it says slightly different. It says that Rabbi Akiva and all of Israel, all of the nation of Israel, Ugedolei HaChachamim, and the great sages believed that he was the Mashiach. However, in the Jerusalem Talmud, it says that there was an opposition. Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta. Why didn't Maimonides mention the opposition in the laws of kings? Why does he say that all the sages of a generation believed that he was the Mashiach if there was Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta who opposed him? So this is a very big question on the Maimonides, because that the Jerusalem Talmud preceded the Maimonides, right? The Jerusalem Talmud even preceded the Babylonian Talmud. It is a very ancient source. Okay, so how could Maimonides say he contradict the Jerusalem Talmud? So, what do you say? Try and answer the question. Now, if I stop at the Yeshua now, none of you are going to be able to go to sleep in the night.
Exactly.
Because, but how can one go to sleep, right, if it is a question on Maimonides, right? Maimonides is the greatest posek, right? There can't be any question about him. And we have to stay until midnight in order to solve this question, right? But don't worry, we're not going to stay here until midnight because we have Rabbi Rabinovitch.
Oh well.
Okay, but we are going to come to him. But first everyone has to work hard. Okay, try and think of an answer.
Well, this is like a very maybe.
Okay.
But like the Rabbi Yochanan, so he says that like Ben David won't come.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe in like the Bavli or like for the Rambam, talking about like Ben Yosef.
Ah, beautiful. That is a beautiful explanation, and I really like that explanation. That is an explanation that we're going to talk about. But it could be. But there are difficulties about this explanation. Let's say you talk about what you were saying. Now, it is true. There are two Mashiachs in our sources. It is a famous that there's Mashiach ben David and there's Mashiach ben Yosef. The goal of a Mashiach ben Yosef, the son of Yosef, is to deal with independence of the nation of Israel, the physical welfare of the nation of Israel. Rav Kook hints that a Herzl and the Zionistic movement were part of the Mashiach ben Yosef, because they really fought for the independence of the nation of Israel. And the Mashiach ben Yosef, ben David, what is his job?
Like the end.
The spiritual
The
spiritual redemption. Okay, after the state of Israel has been rebuilt, now it is time to put a kedusha in the state and to work on the spiritual aspects of of the state of Israel. So we are now historically just in between Mashiach ben Yosef, the Zionistic movement built the state of Israel, and now it is time to move on to the second step to put a spirituality in the state and to put a Yiddishkeit and everything. So Dor is a suggesting that perhaps Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta is talking about Mashiach ben David, and the Maimonides is talking about Mashiach ben Yosef. So all the sages never thought that a Bar Kochva was Mashiach ben David, and nobody thought that he was Mashiach ben David. But it could be that he was it could be that he had a potential to become a Mashiach ben Yosef, because he was working for the independence of the nation of Israel against the Romans. So this is a beautiful explanation, and I really like this explanation. Nevertheless, there are some difficulties. I am not going to say that because of these difficulties we have to remove this explanation, but I am just saying to be intellectually honest, one has to put these difficulties on the table. Okay, so if you could look at the last page, page 7. So the first difficulty is that why did Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta think that Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Kochva was the Mashiach ben Yosef, because Mashiach ben David, because nobody thought that Bar Kochva was Mashiach ben David, because that Bar Kochva had many difficulties, moral difficulties, spiritual difficulties. We are not going to go into all the difficulties because it is a shiur for itself, by itself. But you just have to believe me that there were many difficulties about Bar Kochva. Things that he said, the things that he did, even the fact that he murdered his uncle. So he did things that no Mashiach ben David who respected himself would do. Okay, so it is not logical to think that Rabbi Akiva thought that he was Mashiach ben David. So to say that the Maimonides thought it was so, it is difficult. It is difficult, and there is another difficulty. The Abarbanel, who was the finance minister before the expulsion of the Jews from Spain in 1492, he actually said that it isn't logical. It isn't illogical to think that Rabbi Akiva thought that Bar Kochva was Mashiach ben David, and he says we could see over here in a page 7, a source 2. So he says here that Omnam Shar Chachmei Yisrael לא קיבלו ממנו שזה משיח בן יוסף, ולא שתהיינה מלחמותיו ונקמותיו הם היהודים להיות לזמן הגאולה. ולכן היו אומרים לו, כמו שזכרתי, עקיבא, עקיבא, סבים בלחייך ועדיין אין בן דוד בא. רוצה לומר, אתה תמות ותיקבר ויצמחו הסבים עליך שנים רבות קודם שיבוא משיח בן דוד, וידעו שמשיח בן יוסף יבוא סמוך למשיח בן דוד. ופנה דרך לפניו, ואיך תחשוב שבן קוזיבה הוא משיח בן יוסף? ומי יודע אם לא בעוון זה נתפס רבי עקיבא במותו, שמיתתו יותר קשה ממיתת שאר הרוגי מלכות. So, the Abarbanel says that Mashiach ben Yosef is supposed to come very close, historically, to a Mashiach ben David. So when Rabbi Yochanan ben Toda says Adayin ben David lo ba, he is also removing the option that Bar Kokhba was Mashiach ben Yosef. But it is a possible to say that Bar Kokhba had the potential to be the Mashiach ben Yosef. However, to say that Maimonides was talking about Mashiach ben Yosef, this is a bit difficult, because when he didn't mention it, he also didn't mention it. He didn't say that he was Mashiach ben Yosef, and if a Maimonides really believed so, he should have written it, right? Okay. So we have to have a different answer to explain Maimonides. Anyone has another suggestion?
I just have
Yeah.
a question,
Yeah.
because I'm a little bit baffled right now.
Yeah.
Bar Kokhba is what tribe, to be specific?
Bar Kokhba, okay. Bar Kokhba, what tribe? That is a good question. I do not know what a tribe he was.
Okay.
But I do not know if he was from the tribe of Yehuda. I am not sure.
So, being said that let's say, for example, is not the tribe from Yehuda, then are they like the sages during the times of Bar Kokhba? Are they just making like assumption that he is the Mashiach, but they are not going to the roots that the Mashiach should be on the house of David?
So it's a good question. It is a good question. I do not know from which tribe he was, and it's a good question. I need to research that. I have to see if there is any mentioning about that in the sources. I do not remember seeing any reference to that, but it is worth it to check again. And there's also the question that you raised: how could they think that he was the Mashiach of the tribe of Yehuda, of a Ben David? But according to what Doro said, they never thought that he was from the Mashiach of the David. It could be that they thought that he was Mashiach ben Yosef, and then there isn't any question. Now, pay attention, please, to the words of Maimonides in the laws of the Ta'aniyot, and then try and find an answer from what he says. ודימו כל ישראל וגדולי החכמים שהוא המלך המשיח. And all of the nation of Israel and the great sages thought that he was the Mashiach. How could you answer the question based on the words of a Maimonides?
Well, it sounds kind of mean, but maybe like Rabbi, what's his name? Rabbi,
Yochanan ben Torta.
yeah, maybe he wasn't a chacham. Like, sorry, I apologize. Well, maybe he wasn't a chacham.
That's right. That's right. That is actually an answer that is some bring. Yes. That is an answer. Yes. It is a good answer. Some tried it to say because that he is not mentioned so much in the Talmud. I think he's only mentioned in one or two other places. So perhaps the Rambam, Maimonides, did not believe that he was the greatest sage in his generation. He probably believed that he was a sage, but if you pay attention to the words of the Maimonides, the great sages of a generation. So perhaps he was not on in that level. However, I must say that that answer is incorrect, and I'm going to prove it. And perhaps, no, it's okay, because when some say what you would say, but I've got a big kushya on that, a big question, and please pay attention to the words of the Jerusalem Talmud, okay? How does Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta speak to Rabbi Akiva? Pay attention. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta, Akiva ya'alu asabim b'lechayecha v'adayin ben David lo yavo. Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta said to Rabbi Akiva, Akiva ya'alu asabim b'lechayecha. How did he speak to him?
Not addressing him as a rabbi.
Call him Rabbi Akiva.
Yeah.
He didn't call him Rabbi Akiva, right? So perhaps Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta was such a great sage that he was on the same level, or was considered on the same level as Rabbi Akiva, that he felt perfectly all right to call Rabbi Akiva his personal name and not to call him Rabbi Akiva. And the fact that the Jerusalem Talmud quotes him in that language for generations and didn't change it to Rabbi Akiva, or write that he should have said Rabbi Akiva, it is quoted like this. So I am sorry, though, but I can't accept your explanation, although it is a very good explanation, and some rabbis bring it. So
I have a question for you.
yeah.
So you said that it was first like the Talmud Yerushalmi, and then it was Rambam, right?
Right.
So is it possible that that when you said that like all like the Chachamim in my generation, so is it possible that Rabbi Yochanan wasn't in his generation? Because wasn't Rabbi Yochanan before Rambam?
Well, Rabbi the Maimonides is actually telling us what happened at the generation of Rabbi Akiva.
Oh, right.
And at the generation of Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Yochanan ben Torta was his colleague, and he discussed a Bar Kochva with him. So we're going to have to, since we don't have a satisfying answer, we are going to have to see what Rabbi Rabinovitch says.
Finally.
Okay, and the Yade Pshuta, and with this we're going to conclude the lesson. So Rabbi Nachum Rabinovitch, you could see in page 8, okay, where it says 25. Now, as I mentioned earlier, many questions on Maimonides are removed when you examine early manuscripts, because as I said at the beginning, there have been many mistakes over the years because of printers, because of those who copied the manuscripts. So there were many different mistakes. So also regarding to our question, there is a very big mistake that if one examines an early manuscript, which Rabbi Rabinovitch bases his commentary on, I am just going to return to the book of Kings. Sometimes he brings a picture of a manuscript. I am not sure if he brought it over here, but in other books he brings a picture of the manuscript. No, I don't see the picture here, but he has. He says that the book, the Laws of the Kings, is based on a very reliable manuscript called Oxford 613. This is a coincidence that it's a 613, which was written in Aram Etzova, which is in Assyria nowadays, and over there, if we look at that manuscript, there is not the words v'dima hu v'kol chachamei doro shehu HaMelech HaMashiach. Those words don't appear in the manuscript. So there isn't any question, because the Maimonides never mentioned that Rabbi Akiva and all of the sages of his generation thought that he was the Mashiach. He didn't say those words, and if he didn't say those words, so there isn't a problem. So, and if we look in the laws of the Ta'aniyot that we mentioned before, it doesn't say that all the sages. It says the great sages. Okay, so Rabinovitch learns from here that not all of the sages agreed with Rabbi Akiva, and the Maimonides hints to us, and he tells us, not all of the sages afford that. So this is the answer of the Rabbi Nachum Rabinovitch, based on early manuscripts, and this only proves to us the importance to always go to the primary sources, always go to the early sources, and just because that something is printed, it does not mean that it's true. Especially in the case of a Maimonides, one has to go to the manuscripts, and you could go. And the huge advantage of the Yad Pshuta, it is that he bases his commentary on the most accurate manuscripts, so many of the questions are just removed. So this is what I wanted to share with you tonight in memory of Rabbi Nachum Rabinovitch, who passed away last week, 3 years ago.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
So I'm not sure like if it's halacha or something, but isn't it like there an idea that you have to like quote when you like write or teach something, right? That's like an idea in Judaism or something. You have to like quote or like
say it again.
I'm not sure if it's halacha or it's like just an idea. Isn't there some like rule that you have to like quote like what you write or teach like in Judaism? It's like quote who said it or where it's from, right?
That's right. It says that it is. We actually learn it from Esther that it says v'yetaged b'shem Mordechai, that she told King Achashverosh in the name of Mordechai. Right. So it says that whoever quotes something in the name of who said it brings redemption to the world. And if you pay attention to the Talmud, goes out of its way to say exactly who quoted it, and sometimes a few generations, right? That's right. Amar Rav Dimi, Amar Rav, like all kinds of a whole line of different sages in order to come to the most earliest sources. So you are absolutely correct.
Right. So the question was, how's it possible that the Rambam wrote all these books? He didn't quote one. He didn't quote anybody. He didn't give anybody's source. He quotes
So, as I said, Maimonides, he regretted it. Maimonides regretted it, and he said that if he had the strength and time, he would have rewritten his, not exactly rewritten his books, but he would write a special book that explains the sources. His intention was why did he do it in the first place? It is because that he saw that the Torah was being forgotten, and he decided that he's going to walk in the footsteps of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, who in the Mishnah there is a Stam Mishnah. A Stam Mishnah, it is when he doesn't quote who said a certain law. So the Maimonides, he felt that he was continuing the work of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, but as I said, eventually he changed his mind, and the commentators all over the centuries, over 800 years, did their best, and they did a very good job to resource the different laws. But Rabbi Rabinovitch really wrote the book that the Maimonides dreamed of writing and never was able to do so. Yeah. So thanks for your question, and thanks everyone for your insights.
Thank you, Rabbi.